I'm Megan. I married my husband Stephen 3 years ago. However, I am estranged from my mother-in-law. One time my sister-in-law, Susan, contacted my husband, and we arranged to meet. Honestly, my husband and his sister aren't that close. From my perspective. She's a sweet and thoughtful sister though. My sister-in-law hadn't contacted us for trivial matters before. So I wondered what it could be about. But she said, actually, I'm getting married this time. She has been dating her boyfriend for about a year. Her boyfriend is still in his early 20s, but it seems he's already saying things like, I think it's time to get married, and apparently, he's been showing her wedding magazines and even forcing her to pick out rings. And that was before he proposed. Despite disliking forceful men, it seems my sister-in-law decided to marry him. My sister-in-law is in her late 20s, about a decade younger than my husband. Although I congratulated them sincerely, deep down, I felt troubled by this. I believe my husband felt the same way. Ah, I see. Today I figured out the reason you came. It's about your mom, isn't it? I said that, and my sister-in-law nodded. I remember well how mom behaved at your wedding. Since then, it seems even relatives don't come near. And isn't mom overly attached to me anyway? If she finds out I have a boyfriend, I don't know what she will do to me. In the past, she even barged into my boyfriend's parents' house, pressuring us to break up. While serving tea, I unintentionally remarked, your mom is really difficult to deal with, isn't she? It's really embarrassing having such relatives. My sister-in-law sighed. If you truly want to marry him, you have to cut ties with your mother, my husband advised. Seriously, it's understandable for my husband to feel this way. The reason my husband and I are estranged from his mother is because of our wedding. His mother is unconventional. In general, she had my husband when she was 18, but his father, also 18, then left her. So she left my husband with her parents and didn't care for him much. My husband waited eerily for his mother, who never came to see him but married another man, and gave birth to my sister-in-law more than a decade later. She took in my husband, who was already in high school, when she divorced because she wanted money. For my mother-in-law, my husband was more of a cash cow than a son. She made him contribute his part-time job earnings to the household and doted only on my sister-in-law. My husband received no gratitude from his mother. Instead, he faced harsh treatment. His collection of action figures, a hobby he cherished, was mercilessly sold off. And he was even forbidden from spending time with friends. My husband became pitifully lacking in understanding women, to the point that it was almost tragic. Megan, you're not like my mother. If my mom is the devil, you're like an angel or even a goddess, he said, opening his heart to me, flattering as it may seem. I'm not good enough or beautiful enough to be called a goddess, but compared to my mother-in-law, it made sense that I would look like one. That's how bad a person my mother-in-law was. Such was her great opposition to my husband and my marriage. The reason is simple. Then I won't get Stephen's salary anymore. Will I, you thief? She scolded me like that. My mother-in-law demanded from my parents, saying, if you really want to get married, then pay the betrothal money properly. How about $30,000? Don't be ridiculous, my husband said. There's no way such a demand would be accepted. Then next to my mother-in-law, he apologized to my parents, lowering his head and saying, I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. If he hadn't apologized to my parents, our marriage would have been called off. I loved my husband and my parents agreed that Stephen was not a bad person. My husband started saying, I want to cut ties with my mom. Having a parent like her makes me embarrassed. Then came the wedding. My mother-in-law showed up wearing a red dress as if she were the main character. She wore rings with fancy diamonds, rubies, sapphires, and more, but strangely, they didn't look good on her. My husband and I are today's main characters, not you, Megan. What's with you, Mom? Trying to steal the show? But my mother-in-law remained unfazed. I couldn't have a wedding when I gave birth to you. So it's okay for me to be the center of attention today, she retorted. My parents were already exasperated. My mother sighed while my husband clenched his lips until they bled. My relatives were understandably unamused, and even my husband's relatives wore expressions of disbelief. I forced a smile at my mother-in-law's outrageous behavior, but at that moment, I had a sinking feeling that things would only get worse. Even so, there was no option to cancel the wedding, so all we could do was pray that my mother-in-law wouldn't do anything. Please God, can you keep my mother-in-law quiet until the ceremony is over? I prayed for the first time. Whether that prayer was answered or not, nothing happened during the ceremony. However, an incident occurred after the ceremony ended. This is my congratulatory gift, as Megan will reluctantly become my daughter-in-law. So it wouldn't be a problem if I took all the gifts, right? My mother-in-law said, demanding all the wedding gifts for herself. I was taken back by my mother-in-law's actions, and my husband rushed to chase after her to rectify the situation. But my mother-in-law was nowhere to be found. She has the agility of a cat burglar. After that, my husband tried calling his mother several times, but she didn't pick up and just disappeared. I probably won't encounter such unreasonable people again for the rest of my life. That's how unbelievable my mother-in-law is to me. My husband tearfully apologized to me and our relatives who witnessed such a scene, saying, I'm truly sorry. I'll cut ties with that woman, so please forgive me for just this once, and spare me from divorce. Everyone reassured my husband, you're not at fault. It's that person who's in the wrong. So there's no need for a divorce. I too feel sorry for my husband, and I can't forgive my mother-in-law. Let's cut ties for my husband's sake, I said. I feel bad for the people who gave us gifts, but let's consider it severance pay. If that's enough to cut ties, and it's a small price. Thus, my husband cut ties with his mother. It seems that the relatives decided not to get involved in the matter at all. After that, my husband consulted a lawyer to ensure the arrangement's legal documents were prepared, and as soon as my mother-in-law returned from her extravagant spending spree with wedding gift money, she was promptly asked to sign, but I couldn't find peace of mind in that, because for my husband, who didn't have a father, she was his only parent. Was it really okay for me to marry him under these circumstances? Did my presence cause him to lose his family? With these thoughts, I suddenly felt lonely and began to cry. Then a white cat named Dora jumped onto my lap. Although Dora is a stray cat, it often comes to play in the yard, and whenever I look sad, it always jumps onto my lap like this, right? This was for the best, wasn't it? For our happiness? I continued to comfort myself while stroking Dora. Thank you always, Dora. I cut off all contact with my mother-in-law after that, but not with my doted-upon sister-in-law. My sister-in-law is stunning, like a model who could be on a magazine cover, just like my mother-in-law was. By the way, my husband is more like your average Joe. Because my sister-in-law is like that, it seems many guys have told her they like her. Maybe over 100, but she only dated a few of them. However, none of the relationships lasted more than a month. This is because my mother-in-law always interferes, fearing that her beloved daughter might be taken away. It seems my sister-in-law was once proposed to, but at that moment, my mother-in-law suddenly barged in and threw the engagement ring the man offered into. The abuse of my mother-in-law continued for the next hour or so, and finally, my sister-in-law calmed down. So, I plan to marry him without telling Mom. Next time, I'll definitely make sure no one interferes, my sister-in-law said firmly before leaving. As soon as the front door closed, I couldn't help but ask my husband, do you think no one will interfere? Impossible, my husband replied curtly. There's no way she can get married without telling my mother-in-law. After all, my sister-in-law lives with her. It's a miracle she's been able to keep it hidden until now. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law live together. My mother-in-law is a housewife, and now, she's living off my sister-in-law's income. So there's no way she'd let go of her cash cow daughter, whom she dearly loves. Furthermore, my sister-in-law is completely dependent on my mother-in-law. She's never cooked a meal or even washed her own underwear. Because of my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law wouldn't do anything. My mother-in-law would say, you don't have to do anything. You're tired from work, so rest. What if you get hurt? I wouldn't want that. And she wouldn't let her do anything. If there's someone who gets injured, just from washing underwear, I'd like to see that. However, if she decides to get married, it becomes not just our problem but also an issue for both families. How do they explain it to his parents? That was the biggest problem. I've heard that it's not uncommon for couples to have small weddings these days, which might make it possible for the two of them to keep it a secret somehow. But what about afterward? Even if they manage to get married, I can't imagine that mother-in-law of mine allowing them to live as a couple. She's been terrible to me and my husband, so I dread to think what kind of attacks she'll launch against my sister-in-law's boyfriend. It would be fine if they were just used as cash cows like my husband, but it's unlikely to be that simple. She was only thinking about how she can make things easier for herself somehow. The only reason she told us she was getting married was because she wanted us to intercede if anything went wrong. She's always been naive in her thinking. Those words from my husband made me remember. Come to think of it, she didn't help us at all during our wedding, did she? Actually, she seemed like she was enjoying the food everyone left behind. When we were going through a hard time, does she enjoy eating out of other people's misery? Can she protect her husband with that? If she can't do that, then she's not even qualified to be married. It would be better to suggest breaking off the engagement, even now. That way we can avoid dealing with such an unhappy person. I don't care what happens to them. I'll spend my life protecting you, my beloved wife. My husband, perhaps embarrassed by this declaration, blushed and looked down. I love my husband like that. That's why I chose him. Then, a few months later, my sister-in-law contacted me again. Now she wants to introduce me to her boyfriend too. My mother-in-law hadn't found out yet. Well, if she's serious, I guess I can't help but support her. When my husband said that, I decided to think positively about my sister-in-law's marriage. But here's the problem. My sister-in-law's boyfriend turned out to be quite a character. He looks like he's into sports and he's definitely the macho, cool type, but my husband is cooler. I listened to how they met, and at first, we were all chatting amiably. Because she never lets me meet her family at all, I started to think, am I just being deceived and played? Just when my sister-in-law's boyfriend started talking about it, an unsettling atmosphere began to develop. That's not true. Actually, my mom's a bit intense. My sister-in-law hurriedly began making excuses. But I was surprised by her generosity in not mentioning anything about my mother-in-law. Do you really think they could just get through the wedding in silence? Then, as the conversation progressed, in order to demonstrate the severity of my mother-in-law, I took over and explained my husband's upbringing and the incidents at the wedding, since he's not good expressing himself. But halfway through, my sister-in-law's boyfriend's face started to pale. 10 minutes later, I explained the severity of my mother-in-law to my sister-in-law's boyfriend, but he muttered, "The worst." I said, "She's really the worst, isn't she?" and agreed. But my sister-in-law's boyfriend said, "That's not it. The one who's terrible is you." "How dare you lie like that? You're exaggerating too much." Upon hearing that, I was speechless. Even my husband had his mouth open, looking dumbfounded. "So you're against us getting married, huh? That's why you're talking such nonsense, right? There's no way someone like that exists." Both my husband and I were momentarily stunned by this man's statements. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law's boyfriend was getting more and more heated. "I feel sorry for your mother. Don't you have any sense of awareness about being a wife? Isn't it embarrassing to bully the mother-in-law instead of the daughter-in-law bullying my mother-in-law? What is this guy talking about? I don't get why the word awareness is popping up here. I'm totally lost. It's like I'm having a conversation with an alien or something. Isn't it the bride's role to support her mother-in-law? She's just a little mean because her cute daughter was taken away. She's cute, my girlfriend. You have to be gentle in those situations. So does that mean I have to give in even if I'm not at fault? I cut ties because I wasn't on that level. But why can't you understand that? I think it's because you're like that, is why we can't get married. Please be kinder to your mom. I'll even help you reconcile. My sister's boyfriend started making no sense to me, and our relationship has completely soured. I never thought there'd be someone as unbelievable as my mother-in-law here. The world is small. About 2 months later, my sister-in-law's boyfriend forcefully planned a wedding that said it was a modest affair with just immediate family from both sides, close friends, and nearby relatives. Well, if it's like that, the damage might be minimal. Even if my mother-in-law causes some trouble. I thought. I was drinking when I got the call about the ceremony. My husband repeatedly asked my sister if everything was okay, but it seems he didn't get a satisfactory answer. Just a hesitant probably. When we went to the venue, memories of our own wedding came flooding back. And on our table, there was also a tag with my mother-in-law's name on it. Oh, so in the end, your mother found out, huh? Well, I guess that's how it goes. I muttered, and my husband said, my sister's boyfriend insisted that there was a wedding, and she couldn't possibly not invite my mom. I knew there was no way it would end smoothly. I nodded broadly. Yesterday seems, my sister's boyfriend couldn't stay silent any longer and talked to that woman yesterday. He really has a knack for adding fuel to the fire. That woman is my mother-in-law. My husband hasn't called. Since then, I've referred to my mother-in-law by her name. A few minutes later, my mother-in-law, dressed appropriately for a wedding, unlike last time, appeared. However, she came with an unbelievable person. Yes, it was an unfamiliar baby. The unexpected appearance of my mother-in-law left both relatives and other attendees in awe. Then my mother-in-law slumped down and mumbled something about my sister-in-law's boyfriend. It was eerie, especially with her holding the baby. She seemed poised to cause trouble without a doubt. Amidst the commotion in the venue at that moment, the announcer's voice cut through. It's time for the entrance of the newlyweds. Please welcome them with applause. With that announcement, cheerful music began to play. Once my mother-in-law was forgotten, the venue erupted with applause. My sister-in-law and her boyfriend appeared at the entrance, and the spotlight shines on them. My mother-in-law suddenly raises her head. This child is ours, yours and mine. So leave my daughter, and then you should give me child support too. She yelled and confronted my sister-in-law's boyfriend. I chased after my mother-in-law. My sister-in-law's boyfriend exclaimed. I quickly caught up, and after picking up the baby, I restrained my mother-in-law in a headlock. However, she continued to struggle, so I accidentally ended up flinging her away. It's been a while, so I may have overdone it a bit. By the time I regretted it, my mother-in-law had collided with the food table and then crashed into the wall. Yes, I took judo from elementary school to high school. For someone like me who was used to throwing adults left and right, throwing my mother-in-law was a piece of cake. I guess it's just been a while, so maybe I got a little carried away. I regret doing that. I wish I could have thrown her like that at my own wedding, and I felt guilty for ruining the food. I'll offer to reimburse her later. My mother-in-law was a bit puzzled by the suddenness of the situation. Apparently the strike was not bad. Good. As my mother-in-law was about to unsteadily rise to her feet, I promptly tripped her up. Mom, are you trying to ruin the ceremony? And whose child is this baby? You don't really think it's her boyfriend's child, do you? As I said this, I looked at my sister-in-law's boyfriend, who vigorously shook his head. Then my mother-in-law, yes, that's right. I just borrowed this baby from around here. If I claim it's yours, I can get child support and separate you from my daughter. I thought I was killing two birds with one stone. Everyone was stunned by her unbelievable statement. When it was our turn, we cut ties because you ran off with all the gifts. But what are you planning to do in this situation? I declared loudly enough for my sister's boyfriend's parents to hear. The venue fell silent. My mother-in-law turned bright red in an instant. To my question, my sister's boyfriend's father, of course. We'll cut ties. Is that okay with you too? He glared at his son. Of course. I don't want to have to deal with such a lousy person in the future. You're okay with that, right? Of course. So mother, thank you for all you have done for me. I'm going to sever my parent-child relationship with you as of today. My sister declared the estrangement. After that, my sister-in-law's boyfriend came to me. It was exactly as you said. He apologized for his previous remarks. I'm truly sorry. He lowered his head deeply in apology. Absolutely got it. From now on, you'll be the one protecting my sister-in-law from my mother-in-law. Remember, if you can't do that, you'll end up like my mother-in-law. I'll keep that in mind, sis. No, I mean big sister. It seems my sister-in-law's boyfriend, or rather, my sister-in-law's husband, was impressed by my splendid throwing technique and started calling me big sister. Well, I don't mind being called that. So from now on, I'll take care of them as a big sister. I gave my sister-in-law a thorough scolding for secretly getting married, without informing my mother-in-law. She cried and reflected, so hopefully such things won't happen again in the future. Now, I decided to apologize to the chef for messing up the cooking with a smile. The chef forgave me, saying the real problem was with the mother-in-law. Then we enjoyed the dishes and the cake. Cutting ceremony took place without any issues. Of course, my mother-in-law wasn't present at the event because she was taken away by the police on suspicion of kidnapping. It seems one of the relatives had quietly reported it. Good job, unknown relative. Somehow, the ceremony ended without any major problems. After the wedding, now it was my husband's turn to apologize to me. Sorry, I couldn't do anything. You're so important to me all the time. I always say I'll protect you no matter what happens. I'm a failure as a husband, he feels down. No, that's not true. I'm always being helped by you. Please stay by my side from now on. My wonderful husband. I embrace my husband. We spent a passionate night that day. Then, a few months later, my sister-in-law and her husband consulted a lawyer and even prepared legal documents for the estrangement. Although my mother-in-law was supposed to be sentenced to at least 3 years in prison for kidnapping, it seems that the baby's parents offered a settlement, considering the baby was unharmed after being released from detention. My mother-in-law signed the documents for estrangement and ended up losing her entire family. It's her own fault. As for my sister-in-law and her husband, they seem to be living happily now that they've cut ties with my mother-in-law. It seems my scolding from that day had an impact, as they come to visit me once a month now and consult me about various things. While I'm happy to be relied upon, I wish they'd decide on furniture placement by themselves. And as for my mother-in-law, well, she's been living alone and lonely on a pension since then, it seems. She only has stray cats as friends now. 3 years later, my husband and I, along with my sister-in-law and her husband, were blessed with children. This is also thanks to cutting ties with that person. I laughed with my sister-in-law and her husband. I hope this happy life continues forever. With that thought in mind, I stroked the white cat sleeping contentedly on the veranda.